You think you're taking Father's Ikoyi mansion from me? You're dreaming, Adiez. How dare you? And you think you deserve it just because you're the older daughter? Father's properties belong to the family, not you alone. The mansion, the Lagos properties, and the company shares, I have sacrificed more for this family than you ever have. Sacrificed? You mean manipulated father while he was sick? I know exactly what you've been doing. Watch your mouth! No, you watch yours. You want the houses, the land, the shares, but you will not take everything from me. Over my dead body. Then prepare yourself, because I am not backing down.
Enough, both of you.
Father, she is trying to steal what belongs to me. No, Father, she is trying to take everything before you even make your final decision.
What is this? My properties are not prizes for two daughters to fight over while I am still alive.
Then tell us who will inherit them. Yes, Father. Tell us who gets the mansion, the land, and the company shares.
You are both so focused on what I own that you have forgotten what it means to be a family. And neither of you knows that there is someone else who has a rightful claim to everything you are fighting over.
What are you talking about, Emeka? What do you mean?
Nothing, not yet. 3 years ago, I lost everything that mattered. Now I have to find out who truly cares about my father and who only cares about his money.
For 6 years, the name Kelechi Adeyemi Johnson was a name whispered with shame in the halls of Adeyemi Group of companies. He was the billionaire Chief Emmanuel Adeyemi's only son, born to Emmanuel's late first wife, and raised in a world where every door opened before he even knocked. By 19, Kelechi had his own driver, his own credit line with no limit, and a name that made club owners in Lagos, London, and Dubai clear whole sections for him. By 22, he had wrecked 2 cars, been arrested once for public disorder that his father's lawyers quietly buried, and fathered a reputation for cruelty towards staff that the household still whispered about years later. The driver he screamed at for arriving 4 minutes late. The maid he fired on the spot for folding his shirts wrong. The security guard he struck across the face for asking to see his ID at his own front gate. 3 years ago, everything collapsed in a single night. Kelechi, drunk and reckless after losing badly at a private card game, crashed his car into the lobby of a boutique hotel in Victoria Island and, in his fury, knocked over a lit candle display that started a fire. 2 people were injured. The story was suppressed from the press with an enormous payment, but it could not be suppressed from Kelechi's own conscience. He remembered sitting in a police holding cell that night, watching smoke still clinging to his expensive shirt, and hearing, for the first time in his adult life, a voice inside him ask, "What have you become?" He did not go home that week, or the next. He left Lagos with nothing but a small bag, and drove until the car ran low on fuel outside Calabar, where he abandoned the vehicle at a mechanic's yard, telling the confused mechanic to keep it as payment for silence, and wandered on foot until he found himself, exhausted and starving, outside a small cinder-block chapel with a hand-painted sign, "Mount Zion Deliverance Assembly, all are welcome." He stumbled inside more from thirst than faith. He stayed until morning. He kept coming back. Pastor Emmanuel, an old gentle man who never once asked Kelechi his surname or his story, gave him work sweeping the chapel yard in exchange for meals. Kelechi slept in a room behind the church for the first 6 months, ashamed to even write a letter home. Slowly, painfully, he began to change. He learned to fast. He learned to pray without performing. He learned to apologize to a wrong trader in the market without expecting anything in return, simply because it was right. He took odd jobs as a bricklayer's assistant, then a warehouse loader, then eventually a junior clerk at a small logistics firm, always under the name Emeka, a name he chose because it meant may God not become angry. By the 3rd year, Kelechi was a different man, quieter, steadier, slower to anger, quicker to kneel, but he still had not gone home. Fear kept him away as much as shame did. Then came the phone call from his old school friend, Tunde Balogun, now managing a small staffing and cleaning agency in Lagos. "Kelechi," Tunde said, voice tight, "I heard from a cousin who works security at Adeyemi Group. Your father is sick. Really sick, heart trouble, and the house is full of new people since you disappeared. A new manager, new staff, your stepsisters fighting like hyenas over who inherits what. Nobody knows if you're alive or dead. You need to come home. Kelechi sat with that news for 3 sleepless nights. He wanted desperately to run straight into his father's arms and beg forgiveness, but another fear held him back, stronger than shame. What if the men and women surrounding his dying father were only there for the money? What if he walked in as the returning heir and every kindness shown to him from that point forward was performance, calculation, positioning for inheritance, the very same poison that had made him cruel and blind in his old life? He remembered his father's own words to him once, long ago, spoken bitterly after a business partner betrayed him. A man who returns with only his name will discover who truly served him and who only served his money. So Kelechi made his decision. He called Tunde back. "I'm coming home," he said, "but not as Kelechi. Get me hired at my father's house through your agency as a cleaner. Nobody is to know who I am. Not you, not anyone, until I say so." Tunde argued for a full hour. "Your father could die not knowing his own son stood beside him. What if something happens to you in that house, and there's no record of who you really are?" Kelechi was firm. "Then you will hold the truth, Tunde. Lock my real documents away. If anything happens, you tell my father everything. But while I am there, I need to see that house through a servant's eyes, not an heir's eyes. I need to know if the goodness I remember in my father's home ever truly existed, or if it was only ever bought." That night, Kelechi shaved the beard he had grown in Calabar, packed one small bag, tucked his identity papers into a locked box he left in Tunde's care, and dressed in the same plain, faded clothes he had worn as a warehouse loader. In the morning, he stood again, for the first time in 3 years, before the tall white pillars and lion-shaped fountain of the Adeyemi mansion in Ikoyi, mop and bucket assigned to him by the agency, waiting quietly at the gate like any other new hire, praying under his breath that God would give him strength for whatever he was about to find inside. The gateman barely looked up as he waved Emeka through toward the staff entrance at the side of the compound, checking his name off a clipboard list without a second glance. Kelechi's chest tightened as he walked the familiar gravel path, now viewed from an angle he had never once considered in his old life. The servant's path, narrower, less swept, running along the edge of the property behind the hedges, where the family car never passed. At the staff entrance, a stern-faced man in a sharp grey suit stood waiting, arms folded, eyes already narrowed with suspicion. This was Mr. Godwin Okafor, house manager, hired 2 years earlier, after the previous manager retired. Godwin looked Emeka, up and down slowly, taking in the cheap shoes, the slightly too large uniform shirt the agency had handed him. "You're late," Godwin snapped, though Kelechi had arrived early. Cleaning agency workers use the servants' entrance, not the front gate path. Not ever. Are you slow or simply disrespectful? "Sorry, sir. Won't happen again, sir," Kelechi said, bowing his head, swallowing 3 years of hard-won humility into that single sentence. Something inside him, the old Kelechi, screamed in outrage at being spoken to this way. The new Kelechi simply breathed and let it pass and thought, "This is exactly the education I came here for." Godwin marched him through a tour of duties, delivered like a military briefing. Wake at 5 a.m., report to the kitchen wing, collect the day's chore list from the whiteboard, complete all ground floor cleaning before the family wakes at 7, avoid the east wing entirely unless summoned, never speak first to any family member, never make eye contact with Chief Emmanuel unless addressed, and under no circumstances touch anything in the study without direct instruction. Kelechi absorbed every rule with quiet nods, filing away details about a house that 3 years ago had been entirely his own. He was assigned a small room behind the kitchen, a narrow bed, a single window, a wobbly fan, and a uniform 2 sizes too large that smelled of the previous cleaner who had quit without notice a week earlier. As Godwin finished barking instructions and stalked off toward the main house, a soft, warm voice called out from the garden path, "Don't mind him.
He barks at everyone, their first week. By month 2, he'll only bark at you twice a day, instead of 10 times. Kelechi turned and saw a young woman, kneeling among a bed of hibiscus flowers, sleeves rolled to her elbows, soil staining her fingers, a faded headscarf tied loosely over natural hair. This was Amarachi Nwosu, 26 years old, head maid of the household, and, though she did not carry the title formally, the true quiet backbone that kept the entire staff functioning, despite Godwin's chaos. "Thank you," Kelechi managed, and something shifted strangely in his chest, a warmth he hadn't expected, hadn't planned for, and immediately distrusted. He reminded himself sharply, "You are here to observe, not to feel." Amarachi smiled and returned to her flowers, humming softly under her breath. Kelechi froze mid-step. It was a worship chorus, the very same one the small congregation in Calabar used to sing every Sunday morning. He stood there stunned for a long moment. Could there truly be someone in this house of money and pride who still hummed hymns while alone among the flowers, believing no one was listening? His first full day tested every muscle in his body he had built as a warehouse loader, and every ounce of patience 3 years of prayer had carved into him. He mopped the entire ground floor twice, because Godwin declared the first attempt an insult to the family standard. He polished brass door handles until his fingers blistered. He carried crates of imported mineral water up the back stairs, the same stairs he used to slide down as a laughing boy in socks. Every corner of the house whispered memories at him. The dent in the hallway wall from the bicycle he crashed at age 9, the exact spot in the dining room where his mother's portrait used to hang before she passed, and his father, in his grief, had it moved upstairs. That evening, Kelechi was handed a dinner tray and instructed to deliver it to the upstairs study, his father's study, because the assigned junior maid had gone home sick. His hands trembled violently as he climbed the stairs. He paused outside the heavy wooden door for nearly a full minute, breathing, praying, before finally pushing it open. Chief Emmanuel Adeyemi sat in a high-backed chair by the window, staring out at the darkening garden. He was thinner than Kelechi remembered, his once full head of hair, now sparse and grey, a woolen blanket draped over his knees, despite the warm Lagos evening, an oxygen tube resting beside his chair, though not in use. For one dangerous, aching second, Kelechi nearly dropped the tray and rushed forward crying, "Papa!" 3 years of longing rising up his throat like fire. He forced himself to steady his hands, keep his eyes low, and set the tray gently on the side table. "Your food, sir," Kelechi whispered, voice deliberately roughened, unrecognizable. Chief Emmanuel did not turn from the window. "Leave it," he said quietly, his voice heavier and slower than the sharp, commanding tone Kelechi remembered from childhood. "I am not hungry tonight. I am rarely hungry these days." A pause. Then, almost to himself, "Strange thing, growing old with an empty house. Money fills every room except the ones that matter." Kelechi bowed and backed out slowly, closing the door with the softest click he could manage. Outside in the hallway, he pressed his back against the wall and let silent tears run freely down his face for the first time since Calabar. His father was alive. His father was in pain, not only physical pain, but a loneliness Kelechi recognized instantly because he had lived inside that same loneliness for 3 long years. And his father had looked directly past him, without the faintest flicker of recognition. The days that followed became a slow, grinding education in humility that no amount of warehouse labor in Calabar had fully prepared Kelechi for, because this humiliation was personal, delivered by people who had once served him wine at his own birthday parties. He scrubbed marble floors until his knees ached and bled through his trousers. He was screamed at by Godwin over dust mist on a chandelier 11 feet in the air. He carried heavy luggage up staircases, while guests stepped around him without a glance, as though he were furniture. The junior staff, taking their cues from Godwin, treated Emeka with casual cruelty dressed as teasing. A driver named Bayo mocked his stiff, unfamiliar way of carrying cleaning supplies, not knowing Kelechi had once ridden in the back of luxury cars, while men like Bayo drove him in silence. A younger maid named Chiamaka spread rumors that the new cleaner was slow in the head because he sometimes stared too long at family portraits in the hallway, lost in memories no one else could see. Worse than the daily grind was the open cruelty of the family itself. One humid afternoon, during a garden luncheon for his father's business associates, Kelechi's stepsister Ifeoma, the elder of Chief Emmanuel's two daughters, from his second marriage, sharp-tongued and perpetually dissatisfied, deliberately knocked a full glass of red wine from a passing tray directly onto the floor near his feet as he crossed the terrace, then screamed at him in front of 20 guests for clumsily splashing her Italian shoes. "On your knees!" Ifeoma demanded, voice carrying across the whole terrace, eyes glittering with cruel enjoyment. "Apologize properly, the way staff in this house are trained to." Kelechi felt every fiber of his old pride roar upward inside him. 3 years ago, he himself might have done something crueler to a maid for a lesser offense, and the memory of his own past sin made the humiliation cut twice as deep. He knelt on the wet terrace tile in front of the watching guests, whispered an apology, and cleaned the stain with trembling hands, his heart burning not with rage now, but with sorrowful recognition of the man he used to be. Amarachi, watching from the kitchen doorway, flinched visibly at the sin, but said nothing in the moment, knowing intervention would only worsen matters. Later that night, however, she found him sitting alone on the back kitchen steps, staring at nothing, and quietly handed him a plate of jollof rice she had saved from the luncheon leftovers. "Everyone deserves a soft place to land in a hard house," she said simply, sitting beside him on the step, careful to leave a respectful distance between them. "I don't know your story, Emiko, but I can see you're carrying something far heavier than a mop and bucket." Kelechi almost told her everything, right there in the dark, the words rising dangerously close to his lips. Instead, he asked carefully, "Why are you so kind in a house like this, where kindness doesn't seem to pay anyone back?"
Amarachi looked down at her hands for a long moment before answering. "My mother worked in this house before me, cleaned these same floors for almost 15 years. When she got sick, Chief Emmanuel paid every hospital bill without being asked. And when she passed, he quietly paid my school fees straight through university. Never told a soul, never once mentioned it to me directly. I only found out because I saw the receipts in my mother's old box after she died. That old man carries more goodness in him than this house lets anyone see anymore. I stayed on his staff after graduating because I owe this family a debt kindness like that can't be repaid with wages." Kelechi had to look away sharply, blinking back tears, his throat too tight to speak. Even now, even broken and lonely, and dying slowly, in an upstairs study, his father was still quietly doing good in secret, exactly as Kelechi remembered him doing, before wealth had hardened Kelechi's own heart. There was hope in this house after all, hope Kelechi had been almost afraid to believe still existed. "Amarachi," he finally managed, "thank you for the food, and for reminding me why some people are worth trusting." She smiled softly, stood, and returned inside, leaving Kelechi alone under the stars with a fullness in his chest he had not felt in years. A fullness that felt dangerously close to falling in love, though he immediately formally told himself it was far too soon and far too complicated for feelings like that. As the weeks passed, Chief Emmanuel's health continued its slow decline, and with it, the tension inside the mansion sharpened into something closer to open warfare. Doctors visited twice weekly now, murmuring about arrhythmia and stress and the danger of another cardiac episode. Lawyers began arriving with folders of paperwork, discussing the restructuring of the Adeyemi Group's leadership and the drafting and constant redrafting of Chief Emmanuel's will. Ifeoma and her younger sister Adais, once merely competitive, now circled each other with open hostility. Adais, quieter and more calculating than her sister, had begun cultivating a careful, dutiful daughter image in front of their father, visiting his study nightly, with tea and gentle conversation. Ifeoma, lacking patience for such subtlety, instead focused her energy on cultivating Godwin Okafor's favor, believing the house manager's daily reports to the family lawyer might tip the inheritance scales in her direction. Godwin, sensing the opportunity of a lifetime, began playing both stepsisters against each other with a practiced cruelty, collecting secrets from each, dropping poisoned hints to both, positioning himself as an indispensable ally, regardless of which sister eventually gained control. He had already, quietly, begun taking small kickbacks from vendors supplying the household, skimming percentages of catering contracts and renovation invoices, confident that Chief Emmanuel's failing health and distracted family left no one paying close enough attention to notice. But Godwin's sharp instincts, honed by years of manipulation, had also begun to notice something about the new cleaner that troubled him deeply. Emeka carried himself oddly for a common laborer, his posture too straight, his vocabulary occasionally too polished. Before he caught himself and corrected it, his handwriting on the chore completion sheets unexpectedly elegant. Twice now, Godwin had observed Chief Emmanuel request Emeka specifically to bring his evening tray, and twice he had noticed the old man's eyes linger on the young cleaner's face a bit too long, an expression Godwin could not quite name crossing the chief's tired features. One evening, while Emeka was out running an errand at Amarachi's request, Godwin let himself into the small staff room behind the kitchen under the pretense of a routine inspection. He searched quickly, efficiently. Under the thin mattress, he found nothing but a worn leather Bible, its pages soft from heavy use. Flipping through it out of idle curiosity, a folded photograph slipped from the back pages onto the floor. Godwin picked it up, unfolded it, and felt his breath catch. A younger version of the cleaner, unmistakably the same face, though younger, cleaner shaven, laughing, stood beside Chief Emmanuel at what appeared to be a company launch event, both of them dressed in expensive suits, the young man wearing designer sunglasses pushed up into styled hair and an obviously costly gold watch on his wrist.
Godwin did not know the full truth yet, but his instinct screamed that this photograph meant something dangerous to his plans. He refolded it carefully, replaced it exactly where he'd found it, and left the room with his mind already spinning calculations. If this cleaner was connected to the missing son somehow, a relative, an old friend, perhaps even sent by Kelechi himself to spy on the household from the shadows, it represented both a serious threat and, handled correctly, a serious opportunity. That same night, unaware of Godwin's discovery, Kelechi sat alone on the back steps once more, troubled by the day's business. He had overheard, while cleaning near the study door, fragments of a heated phone call his father made to the family lawyer about irregularities in the vendor accounts that someone needs to explain. Amarachi found him there, settling quietly beside him. "You looked haunted tonight at dinner," she said softly, "like a man watching a house he used to live in, searching for what changed." Kelechi's heart nearly stopped at how close her words landed to the truth. He turned to study her face carefully in the dim porch light. "Sometimes," he said, choosing each word with great care, "a man has to become small to truly see who around him was ever really big-hearted and who was only ever performing bigness for an audience." Amarachi held his gaze a long moment, something flickering behind her eyes. Not quite recognition, but a stirring unease, a sense that this quiet cleaner spoke with a depth and weight that didn't match his uniform. She almost asked him directly who he really was. Instead, she shook her head gently, telling herself it was only her imagination working overtime in the darkness, and changed the subject to lighter things. The mango tree, in the far corner of the garden, finally ripening after 2 dry seasons. Over the following 2 weeks, something quietly shifted between Amarachi and the young man she knew as Emeka. Their evening conversations by the garden gate, once occasional, became a near nightly ritual. Brief exchanges at first, growing longer as trust deepened. They spoke of scripture, of forgiveness, of the strange mercy of second chances. Amarachi confided fears about her mother's memory fading with time. Kelechi, careful never to reveal specifics that might expose him, spoke in broad, honest terms about a man he once was and deeply regretted, and the slow, painful work of becoming someone new. "You speak like someone who has done something he's ashamed of." Amarachi observed one evening, not unkindly. I've noticed you flinch whenever the staff gossip about the missing son, Kalechi, every single time, without fail. Kalechi's pulse quickened, but he kept his voice level. Perhaps I understand what it feels like to disappoint the people who trusted you most. A man doesn't need to be a billionaire's son to know that particular shame. Amarachi accepted this, though something in her expression suggested she was filing the observation away rather than fully dismissing it. For his part, Kalechi found himself falling, slowly, helplessly, against every warning he'd given himself. For a woman who wanted absolutely nothing material from him, who had no idea he possessed anything beyond a cleaner's modest wages, who valued him purely for the quiet, humble man standing before her, with rough hands and an honest heart, it terrified him and healed him in equal, overwhelming measure. In his old life, women had wanted his money, his name, the doors he could open. Amarachi wanted only his honesty, his patience, his prayers whispered alongside hers in the garden at dusk. Meanwhile, Chief Emmanuel's fondness for Emeka deepened in ways that puzzled the entire household. He began requesting the young cleaner by name for small tasks unrelated to cleaning duties, reading the newspaper aloud when his eyes grew too tired, organizing books in the study, sitting with him simply for company during long, sleepless evenings. Godwin, watching this favoritism grow with mounting alarm, complained privately to Ifeoma that the old man has taken strange interest in that new boy, fueling her paranoia further.
Kalechi thought he had discovered everything, but the biggest secret in his father's house was still hidden. What will Kalechi do next? Watch out for part 2.